Evening team. Let us welcome you all to Dwaytech's masterclass for Introduction to SQL. In this masterclass, we will be looking at concepts related to SQL, like a brief introduction to SQL, all the tools and technologies involved in SQL. As part of this class, you'll understand what a database is, the outline or the structure of a database, how a database functions, and what is SQL and how do you deal with SQL. Is it a language? What are the tools or servers or technicalities or the software is involved in SQL? And what are the databases and how these databases are structured and what are the substructures within a database. All of this will be covered as part of this class. In this class, by the end of this class, you'll have a brief ideology about what a database is, what is SQL, and all the other. Whenever somebody says, what do you know about SQL? What are if the first set of questions that somebody frames in their mind when it comes to SQL, you'll be able to answer all those questions by the end of this class. You'll get a very clear picture about when you are dealing with data analysis or when you are dealing with SQL with a database with SQL and the technologies involved in SQL. You'll get a clear picture. By the end of this class, you'll be able to understand what is SQL and where it comes to play in the industry. Right now, we'll be looking into a presentation where all of your questions which you have in your mind already regarding SQL will be answered. And let us deep dive into Introduction to SQL right away. Dwaytech SQL Masterclass on Introduction to Data. As part of this masterclass about SQL, you'll be learning a lot of topics. We will be starting with what is a database, examples of database. There are a lot of databases around you, within your system, around your environment, in the industry. A lot of databases that you look at every day, but you fail to recognize. But now, after this class, you'll be able to recognize and classify what these databases are. What is DBMS? What DBMS is? What is the full form of this abbreviation? And where it comes to play in regards to SQL? You'll be looking into this class. DBMS working example, CRUD. There is also a slang for this called CRUD. People in the industry call it as CRUD operations. What is this CRUD? What does each alphabet in this abbreviation stands for? We will look into that and what the role of each alphabet or what operation does it signify. What is the significance of this abbreviation also we'll get to know. SQL and queries. SQL, what is SQL? What are queries? Structure of a table, structure of a database, and schema of a database. These words right now, SQL, query, CRUD, and table might sound very foreign to you. But as soon as we get into this presentation, by the end of this presentation, by the end of this class, you will have an idea and you will have a definition in your mind. Also, you'll have a clear understanding so that you will be able to contemplate this in your own words and you will be able to explain to somebody. Right now, the very first question, what is database? Data is a very raw word. Data is a very generalized term. We all know data is something, anything that is information is data. Access to the internet where there is tons of information, terabytes of information on the internet. What do you call it? Access to that internet from your phone, mobile data. Data regarding anything, information regarding anything, raw facts regarding anything is data. And the other part, the counterpart, the second part of this word, base. So this entire thing, base is some place you stay, some place where it is safe, something where you store it, right? That is database. So basically, if I have to give you a very generic definition for your understanding, database is generally a place or a particular location where data is stored. Database. Let us look into a well-defined definition of database. A database is an organized collection of structured information or data, typically stored electronically in a computer system. So in the first point, this definition, if you divide it into two parts, there are two things that are very significant here. Point number one, database is a collection of organized and structured information. Of course, in database, there is a lot of information, but it is not a random collection of information in no particular order. It is a very organized collection. So whatever information that is there within the database, it is very clearly organized and structured. What is that structure? In which form? A ladder is a structure. If you write down information in a points, it is a structure. If you write down information in the form of an essay or a paragraph, that is also a structure. In a database, in what structure is the information stored? How are these structures organized? We will look into it. And the second point here, electronically stored in a computer system. So by the end of this definition, you can contemplate one thing and understand this. Basically, database is a collection of information which is stored on a computer. As simple as that. The second part. A database is usually controlled by a database management system. Our very next question that we had was, what is DBMS? DB, as you can see, DB is the full form for database only. MS is management system. So database is the data that is stored in your computer. Management system is the methodology or the software or the method, whatever process or whatever means you use to manage, to manage the information on your system is called DBMS. That is database management system. Examples of database. Let's look into few examples of database to get a simple picture. Any information which is related and stored in a structured manner called database. So the information which is stored within a database should be related. Like in your do you see messages in your contact dial book? No. Do you see your dial book in your message list? No. In your, if you open your let's look at an example of database to get a clearer picture. Call history. Like I told you, if you open your call history, all the data which is stored in a call history is related to calls only. You'll see outgoing calls, incoming calls, received calls, missed calls, spam calls. So whatever data is there, it is related. All of these calls, all of this data is related to calls that is made from the number that is stored in this particular cell phone device. In a particular phone device, there is a SIM. So whatever calls that have been made by that SIM to that SIM missed, those history only you'll find in call history. Whereas if you have to, for the same person who has made a call, if you have to check has there been any messaging history, you'll have to go to a different database, that is your messaging database, right? So the data here is of one particular type only, that is interrelated data is stored in a particular database. Members of a family. Let's say if we sit down and write a list about the members of a family, is that data related or not? It is interrelated. Let's say I'm just putting up an example ahead of you. I'm writing a table. In this, this is a family database I have put together. There are members of the family, and there are certain things about that family that I mentioned. I've taken into consideration the names of the family members, the roles of that particular person in the family, the profession that they are having, what is their age, and what is their gender. The first entry I have is the person named Ashok, who is the father. He's a retired professor. His age is 65, and his gender is male. The second entry I have in the table is Manjula, who is the mother in the family. She is a homemaker. Her age is 58 and her gender is female. In the same way, all the members of the family are noted. This particular list or table that I have, is it a database? Yes, it is database. This is all information or data about a family. Are the entries in this database, are they related to each other? Yes. In the same way, all the data that is stored in a particular database will be interrelated to each other. Of course, when you say when you're interviewing for a business analyst, when you'll be working as a business analyst, analytics will, in off lately, this is from the past couple of years only, analytics is being asked as a small part of the role, right? Either the HRs or the hiring team is expecting the business analyst to have a minor, at least, a minor information or a little bit knowledge about databases or SQL also for the purpose of analytics. How this data is created, what is this? This is not of much concern for them. From a developer point of view, from a database administrator point of view, types of table, the technicalities of these databases are more important. Whereas being an analyst, retrieving this information for the purpose of drawing metrics or drawing KPIs from them, that is more important in perspective of analyst, not this. But still, to gain knowledge about how a database works, to handle a database, to retrieve information, we should have, being analysts, we should have at least basic information about these databases, which I know by the end of this class, you will get a clear picture. Next point, DBMS, Database Management System. A database management system is a software system that is designed to manage and organize data in a structured manner. So we already told you, we already learned in this part that there is a database. Database means it has related information which is organized and in a structured manner stored in a computer. Okay, what is DBMS though? DBMS is a software system. A software system, what is the purpose of it? To manage and organize data. So there is data on the system, we are managing it, it's already organized, but for a particular reason, if you want to reorganize it, so whatever operations that we want to perform on the particular data, if we have to perform, we need a help of a software, we need the help of a system, which we, in a generalized manner, we call it as database management system. And the second point, it allows us to create, modify, and query a database. So if for a database to exist, we have to create the database first, we have to modify it, we have to query a database. Let's say there is a database of let's say there is a police station, there we have the database of all the employees working at a police station. There'll be details about the constables, the writers there, the sub inspectors, from the lowest cadre of the employee to highest cadre of the employees working in a police station. All the information about them, their name, their age, their salary, their address, their phone number, their rank, everything will be noted in their database. Let's say for a person who is working there as a sub inspector has got a transfer order for any particular reason, he has a transfer order and he's being transferred from that particular station to a different police station in a different district, right? So what do we learn? So what will be the immediate effect of after the person is transferred? The name or the records of that person from this particular police station's database will be removed or transferred to the database of the new police station where this particular person has gone and joined, right? In the same way, to manage the data, we are using database management system to create data, to modify data, and to query a data. So query might be a very new term to you. It might be a, you might have a generic definition in your mind for the words called inquiry. Query is something very similar, has a very similar definition to inquiry. What is query? What is this entire phase called query a database mean? We will look into it. It also manages the security and access controls for that database. Of course, using the DBMS, we can control the accesses to the database, about who can view it, who can edit it, right? So whoever can access the database and up to what extent can they access the database, all these controls, all these security controls can be, to assign them, we need a DBMS, a database management system. But this is something that we have, being analysts, this is something that we have, something that we won't be working on. This is more from a developer's perspective, but yeah, to have knowledge, just so that at what all DBMS, the reach of operationality, the reach of functionality of a DBMS, so that you guys can get a clear picture about that. I'm just giving you a brief definition. It allows to run CRUD operations. What is CRUD operations? We'll look into it. CRUD. C stands for create, R stands for read or retrieve, U stands for update, and D stands for delete. So to create a database, we use a DBMS. So whatever database is there, whatever data is already fed into that database, to read that also we need a DBMS, and to update the database. Like I told you, the person that is being removed from this if a person is being removed from this police station's database and there is a database in the other police station also, this person's records, they have to be updated. That database has to be updated with this particular person's details and delete. The particular person's deletes from the first police station, it has to be deleted, and the same person's records, it has to be updated into the second database, the second police station's database. It's a very simple example that I'm trying to give. So that all these operations, basically from creating it to deleting it, and in between reading it and updating it, everything from the genesis to the death of or deletion of until a database is scrapped, all operations that are involved with the database is done by a DBMS only, a database management system. A few examples of database management system that I can give is, the database is stored on your computer only. It's stored on computers or servers or hard disk or cloud. So there is any place that has proper memory, we can store a database there. But to store this database, create this database, to work on a particular database, we need to have a server, right? Server is basically, DBMS systems are basically the software system that I was talking about. DBMS servers, these are the servers that help you in creating those database, reading those database, updating, editing. The CRUD operations, the CRUD operations that I was talking about just a while ago, just a minute ago, we learned about what operations can be performed on these databases. To perform these data operations, we need a particular set of softwares. That software is called as DBMS servers. There are a lot of softwares that are available on the internet in the market. MySQL is one of the DBMS servers. It is a very basic server. It has a community edition, which is very essential for new users or analysts. For it is a free source software. We can learn from there. We can perform. We can practice in there. Microsoft also has a server called MS SQL Server. Even Oracle have a server of their own. These are the servers, and they have a very basic, like a coder level kind of UI UX. You'll feel like you're coding something in there, just to make, while dealing with these servers, just to make our work easy. Our typing of the code, creating the database, all these operations, just to make the visibility or the UI UX, the user interface, a bit more friendly. All these servers also have editors of their own. So these editors are basically like the front end of it. So there are DBMS editors. MySQL has MySQL Workbench. MS SQL has MS SQL Management Server. It is called as Microsoft Management Server. MS SQL Server, MSSM is called as. And the other one, we have something called as the POP SQL Editor. This is a free source software which is available on the internet and it is on the market also. You can connect these particular editors with any of the servers that is there on the system. So out of these servers, we will be installing MySQL, and we will be using the POP SQL editor. So SQL, generally, developers or data analysts outside in the market, they won't call it as SQL, they call it as SQL. So you say SQL or SQL, it's one and the same thing. So we'll be, as a later part of this video, you will also be guided through MySQL installation and the POP SQL installation. We will look into that also in some time. What is SQL? Okay, what is this SQL? Everywhere, in every job description that you see of lately, any data analyst, which is a very popular course or very popular job that is going around in the market, everybody asks for, do you know SQL? Do you know SQL? Do you know SQL? What is SQL? What is the full form of SQL? SQL stands for Structured Query Language. Like I told you, structured, it denotes that we are dealing with something structured, that is the database. Query language. So the basic query language. SQL is the standard language for accessing and manipulating databases. So SQL is a particular language, right? There is a database on a system. You have a database software, and to talk to that software, you give particular commands to the database using the software. You give commands to create a database. You give commands to add records. You give commands to delete particular data. Again, you give commands to update particular data into that database. All these commands that you give, the communication between a user and a database happens in SQL language. Like for instance, if you are conversing with a person from Kerala, what language you use? You converse with that person in Malayalam. You converse with a person from Maharashtra. You converse with them in Marathi. You talk to a person from either Andhra or Telangana. You talk to them in Telugu. In the same way, when you're dealing with a database that is structured, you talk to the database. You give orders or you give commands to a database in SQL language, the structured query language. So I have that. I put that in a clear definition also. SQL is basically the language with which we communicate with the database through the database management server. Like I told you, there is a database on the system. To manage that, we are using a software called as server. It will connect to the database, and we give these commands in the database server, the DBMS server, whichever server that we are using on our system. We give commands to that database through this server in this particular language, and it will go and run the operations and create data, update data. So whatever performance, the CRUD operations that we want to do with the database can be done in this language only. What are queries? Of course, there is the Q in SQL stands for query language. Query. This word has been there, since you started reading about SQL. Everywhere, the first word that you come across after database is query. So, what is a query? We will look into it. The conversation between a user and the database happens through a language called SQL. Yes. The statements we make in this language to perform CRUD operations on the database is called queries. Exactly. The dialogues that occur in the conversation, right? That is called queries. Basically, if you, let's say, SQL is a very simple language like English, and you are writing create a database called you see business analyst, and add my name as a record in there. This is a query. So query is basically a very simple command. Any command that you are giving to the database through a database management server is called query. As simple as that. So a real-time business DBMS query example. I'll tell you how a query works. You all have used Google, right? Anybody who has used Google, even Google is a database, right? Anything you search on Google, you get, from a simple mathematical formula to something. Let's say you're searching for Pythagoras theorem, you're searching for the value of a car, you're searching for gold price today, you're searching for a particular address in San Francisco. Everything, if you want to know about the best, what are the top 5 pizza joints in New York, every data that you search, you find it on Google. But Google has stored so much of data. But how does whatever you are looking for, how does Google give you answers within seconds? We'll look into it. Step one: type any subject in the Google search bar. Step 2. Google Database Server runs a query in SQL to retrieve the data related to your search. So as soon as you search on the Google search bar, imagine the database management system, whichever Google is using, it will pick the words that you have given in the search bar. It will immediately run a query. It will command the database. See, these are the keywords I am giving you. So whatever data you have, give it on, send it across. I need to see all of the data. Step 3. The query runs through the database to retrieve the data related to the search. So whatever data that you have given, the words in the keyword. So the SQL server has run a query there, has given a command to the database. So that command has reached the database. It is going through the database to check all items or all links, all websites related to your query. It has gathered all the data. Step 4. The retrieved data is displayed to the user. This is how an SQL works also. You give a particular command to the server runs that command to the database, and once whatever action is performed, you get an update on the screen that this particular action was performed. In the same way, this is how a DBMS system or a DBMS query works. This is just a small visual representation because we all perform SQL operations every day while using Google, YouTube, Instagram. So every Amazon Prime, Netflix, so everywhere there is a search bar or a searching engine operation. You're all performing a proper DBMS query, SQL operations in there without the knowledge of it. So from this time, whenever you are searching for something, remember whatever you are giving is not just a search word, it is a query running in the background, right? These are the operations that happen in the back end. So every search operation is thousands of queries which are running on the back end. So database, we just saw what a particular database was. I've been telling you from the starting of this session, we've been listening that whatever data is there in the database, it is stored in a very structured way, in a very organized way. What is the structure of it? What is the how it is organized? How does a database look? We will look into it right now. A structure of a database. So database is like the master structure, the outline of everything. Next to the database, we have tables. In a database, there will be multiple tables, and each table will have rows and columns. We are all familiar with tables. We have all used SQL. We are all used Microsoft Excel. So any table will definitely contain two items. One is rows and one is columns. So every database has multiple tables, and all tables have rows and columns. And of course, intersection of a row and column is a cell. This is a very MS Excel of an definition, but we all know. But the intersection of a row and a column is a cell or an entry or whatever you call it. That is where you store all the data, right? So how does a table look? In a table, especially in SQL, there are two main elements, that is rows and columns. We use other words also for columns, right? In this particular table, this is a proper data structure table. I say this is the same way in how a table is stored in database also. The columns, whichever you see as columns here, you see that they are not just columns, they can also be named as fields or attributes. Basically, they are categories, right? In this, we have headings. They're basically headings. In this table, we have headings called as student name, age, ID, degree, and gender. These are the headings which are in the column. So whatever is stored in place of the columns are the fields or attributes. They're basically categories. and whatever is in the rows are called as records or data items. See, in this table we have in place of columns or fields or attributes, we have student ID, we have name, we have age, we have degree, and we have gender. In the rows we have entries related to it. We have an entry called the student ID is 101, the name of the student is Farhan, the age is 21, the degree is B, and the gender is male. So basically, a table is a combination of both rows and columns. In columns, we have fields or attributes, and in rows, we have records or data items. So this is a schema of a database. So what this is, why are these, what is this picture? You will notice, I'll give you an example of that also. A database is a collection of multiple tables which are related to each other or interlinked with each other. Here, like I showed you a minute ago, I showed you a table of student details, right? In the same way, there are multiple tables here, right? These are the name of the tables: student ID, subscription, courses, rooms, and attendees. These are all the headings of the tables, and these are the attributes or the columns that I mentioned you about. In the student table, there is only one column called ID. In subscription, there are multiple columns here called ID, student ID, course ID, etc. In all of these tables, all the list that is mentioned here is the number of columns. So all these tables together, they come together to form a database. So a database is nothing but a collection of multiple tables which are related or interlinked with each other. All these tables that you see here, they are definitely related to one another. How they are related? Yeah, we'll see. If you see, there is a word called ID here, there is another word called ID here, the same thing. There is the same called ID is here also, the same thing called ID is here also, the same thing called ID is here also, right? So all these tables have something in common. They are related and interlinked to each other. How they're related, how these tables are written, how they're interlinked with each other, we will get to know that in the future. But as of now, this is what we get to learn as part of this first session of this SQL Introduction Masterclass. We understood what a database is. Database is basically collection of tables which are related or interlinked to each other. Okay, what are tables? You know, tables are consisting of rows and columns. What are these columns? These columns are basically field attributes or fields or headings, column headings. Or what are rows? In rows we store the records related to the table. You know, whatever for whatever category that is written above the table as columns, we give entries related with respect to that headings or attributes. Okay, what is SQL? SQL is basically structured query language, the language in which the user communicates with the database. Done. So what else did we learn? We learned what is DBMS. That is a database management system. A system is a software that allows us to perform CRUD operations on a database. What is the full form of CRUD? C stands for create, R stands for read or retrieve, U stands for update, and D stands for delete. We looked into the police inspector transfer example also. I hope that was of good use to you, so that you can get a clear picture about the CRUD operations. And what else did we look at? We looked at a few examples of DBMS softwares, database management system softwares. We'll be looking in the next class. We will look at, we will be creating a particular database. First, we'll do that in Excel. And what are the rules that come into play when we are creating a database? We'll look into that. And we will be installing our SQL server and our SQL editor. We will be creating our first database in our next class. I hope you all are excited. I hope you all get a clear picture, at least theoretically. I hope you all have an idea about what a database is and what SQL is. Of course, without particular, performing particular operations, or without, visually evidencing it, visually experiencing it, you won't have a clear picture, which we will be looking at in the next class. But whereas, meanwhile, you can go through all the theoretical examples that I've given, theoretical definitions that I've given. Take your time, and even we saw how a Google search bar works. You know, how a Google search or any search engine for that case is performing multiple SQL queries in the background. I tried to give you a visual, a demonstration about how an SQL query works. So this is a theoretical knowledge about how a database works, or how a database has a structure of it. So we just understood how the skeletal structure of a database is, but how it is created and how multiple operations can be performed on that. Practically using a proper SQL server, we will look into it in the next class. Meanwhile, you can just go through these. theoretical concepts and get a even better understanding about this concept. I hope you all are excited, and let us learn more about these concepts in the coming classes. Till then, study well, take care, and all the best. Thank you, team.